I'll do a brief intro of all that again, but much more brief.
Mm-hmm. Live stream is booting up.
Got it.
All right, go ahead.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Today we have opened up the Elevation Awards Cohort 6 application. Elevation Awards is a program ran by Baltimore Core. It is specifically focused on BIPOC change makers, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color change makers who are doing work in Baltimore City for Baltimore City residents. It is a $10,000 seed grant, as well as some programming and coaching to help take your idea to the next level. And we are very excited to invite you into this space where our current Elevation awardees are listening and learning and asking questions to some esteemed guests, both past Elevation awardees as well as Fagan Harris, who is the Baltimore Core CEO, and John Brothers, who is a dear best friend of Baltimore Core, and also runs T. Rowe Price's foundation. And so we are excited to have them on as moderators, as well as to welcome you guys into a peek of what you could experience in the Elevation Awards program. If you know of a change maker in their city doing awesome work and just needing $10,000 plus some tender loving care, please tell them to check us out at baltimorecore.org Elevation Awards. Our applications will be open from now until October 22nd, and we are excited to welcome 10 new awardees. To tell you a little bit more about our moderators and our panel and just get into tonight's event, I'm going to pass it on to the Deputy Director of Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Jennifer Clark.
Hello, so me again. So on our panel this evening, our distinguished guest, Dr. John Brothers, who currently serves as the president of the T. Rowe Price Foundation. In addition to his work at T. Rowe Price, he is like a huge community member. It used to be that you could find John out and about, and at the coffee shops in the early morning where you could just like pull up and ask him whatever questions, but now because of COVID, he no longer does that. So no longer have that privilege, but I have seen him out at several community events. And one of our current awardees, Michael, was telling me how you were just out at his event a couple of weeks ago. So definitely a huge advocate for our programs and our leaders and just supporting this work that we do. We have Fagan Harris, who is our CEO of Baltimore Core, and the whole reason that we're all here. He also can be found out and about at coffee shops. And if you need to talk to him, then, well, it used to be that if you wanted to talk to him, you could. There was one in particular, but I won't shout out coffee shop just in case he's there in the morning time grabbing coffee. But Fagan also is a huge advocate of this work and working with our awardees, now sitting on a couple of their boards. Really a champion for everyone's work and making sure that their voices get heard and their projects get seen. So that's Fagan. And then we have Miss Jasmine Hall, who is, she's one of the founders of her whole organization is the African diaspora, but specifically got funded for the youth of the African diaspora. And so she does work around ensuring that the youth of Baltimore see representation, not just here in Baltimore City, but across the world, and so that they can learn more about themselves and sort of help change the narrative of how Black and youth are seen throughout the world and also throughout Baltimore. And she's been able to do this with her curriculum and also with travel. And travel has the ability to open up our eyes to so many things. And she's able to bring that perspective to these youth. So they're able to see that there's a world outside of Baltimore that looks like the world that they live in, and a chance to interact with others. And then lastly, on our panel, we have Miss Shalita O'Neill, who is a consultant. She has her own consultancy agency where she is able to do work with a lot of nonprofits and for-profits, and able to provide support to them, a lot of thought partnership, work around branding and marketing and all things business, in order to help build their projects out and just the work that they do. And as a small business owner, she brings a piece of thoughtfulness to it, because she definitely understands the struggle and the work that entrepreneurs have to put in, which is very meaningful, especially an entrepreneur of color and a woman. It's not easy to do the work that she does, and she does a great job at it. So all of these panelists are going to be able to answer all of your questions, whatever those questions are. Bring it to them, even questions about why we are here. That should be interesting, right? So who wants to start it off? What should our first question be, Tam?
Well, just to remind you all, and also to kind of give some preface to the questions, we are focused on why partnership matters. So, in the work that you're doing and how you are continuing to impact community, how key partnerships, key stakeholders, sometimes thinking outside of community members, how all of those things allow you to maximize the work that you're doing in community, for community, alongside community. So with that, I want to kick it off to Fagan, just to give a brief introduction, if you will, into partnerships and why partnerships are important, and maybe speak a bit to Baltimore Core. And then Fagan, you could pass it to John to do the same. And then our moderators will kick us off with the questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Kudos to the entire Baltimore Core team for not just pulling this event together, but for really stewarding our community and our commitment to this work over the last 6 years. I want to also just thank Dr. John Brothers for being here and for being our champion and our ally in this work. We started this journey together 6 years ago with the premise that genius in our community is everywhere, and that those closest to the problems that we're facing as a city are also closest to the solution. And you look around Baltimore today, and there's every kind of accelerator and small grant program, big grant program that's kind of oriented around that. I think it's worth noting that when this happened 6 years ago, the landscape did not reflect that kind of urgency. The landscape did not reflect that kind of opportunity. And it's really because of the leadership of Dr. Brothers, of Tamara, of Jennifer, of the Elevation Awardees on this call, of the Elevation Awardees in the network, leaders like Antoine Quarles, leaders like Brittany Young, leaders like Ashley Williams, that this is a movement. And we have seen just so much beautiful work, so many powerful institutions built from the ground up in communities in West Baltimore, communities in East Baltimore, communities on the south side of our city. And so I just want to acknowledge the journey and just the huge amount of progress we've seen. We're not where we want to be as a city. We're not where we're going to be as a city, but we're no longer at the very beginning of this work. And that's a testament to everything that has been invested. And so I'm proud to be here. I'm honored to be a part of it. And I want to just thank you all for everything that you've done to get us to this point. On this topic of partnership and stakeholdership, I would say it is the essential truth of social entrepreneurship is partnership. It's the lifeblood. It's precisely the kind of rejects the notion that this is all zero sum. And somehow the way that we are successful is in the corporate space, like winning market share and doing that at the exclusion of other stakeholders. This is the complete inverse of that. This is very much about growing market share, if you will, growing the pie and working with others to unleash our collective assets to make a difference. And so there is no more important question than how do we partner, and how do we partner well, and how do we partner effectively? And so with that as context, I'll happily hand it over to Dr. John Brothers, who I think exemplifies effective and ethical partnership, something he takes very seriously and is a pioneer in the trust-based philanthropy movement, something that we sorely need in our city and in this country. So John?
First, I'm just honored to share the space with all of you, and I'm thankful that you all allow me to be in these rooms and these discussions. It really is an honor. What I would say is, number one, I can't believe it's 6 years of elevation, because I do remember, Fagan and myself, and just kind of talking through, the folks at Baltimore Cohort and the amazing team members there have heard this story a number of times by me. Anybody that hangs out with me enough knows that I have like 10 stories and I just repeat them all on repeat. And so you're likely to hear them a lot once you get to know me more. But Elevation Awards, as a kind of an idea, originated after the unrest in 2015. And at that time, I didn't know anybody in Baltimore because I was relatively new. And as a former community organizer, I knew that the best way to lead to community change was by being a good listener. And so I sat in endless numbers of, basements and community centers and in the living rooms of residents. And one story emerges in that there was a woman who said, I'm kind of tired of people coming into my community and telling me what's best for me. Like, I have ideas on how to change my own community, and kind of told us about a really cool idea and said, where's my financial capital and where's my social capital? And I don't need anybody to do this idea for me. And out of that, and discussions with Fagan and others, Elevation Awards was born. And so 6 years later, I think it's really awesome that we are seeing not only amazing, I think it puts an exclamation point on the idea that folks in neighborhoods and communities have the solutions to solve not only their problems, but the problems of a city, the problems of a region, and the problems of a nation. And I think we now have lots of folks from around the country, Fagan has seen them, and so have I, that are like, what is this Elevation Awards? Like, we want a piece of that. And while that's really nice to hear, what we know and what we want to protect is that this work is owned and governed and managed by people on the ground that know their neighbors by name and are doing this work. And so I thank all of you for allowing the continuation of developing authentic relationships with community members, the folks that you know real well, and the building of this year in and year out. We can only just see really good things moving forward. So thanks to Baltimore Core, thanks to all of you for doing that. So, for us at Tiro and other places, we call this sharing sugar. Shalita and others have heard me say that phrase a lot, but partnership is a very jargony word. We've heard that word millions of times every day. You go to a nonprofit conference and it's likely going to have some word like partnership, collaboration, something like that there. The challenge is that it's become really, really jargony. And ultimately, in many ways, we've lost our way. But if we think about the most neighborly things that we can do, you think about sharing sugar, and that's at the root of what good partnership is about. The idea of two people, two entities coming together because one has and one needs a little bit more, and they're coming together around a common bond. That's ultimately collaboration. And no matter how many fancy words that you want to put, like collective impact or otherwise, that you want to put on this to make it look shiny and cute, it really is at the root level, just sharing of sugar and people coming together around a common cause. And so I'll put my moderator hat on real quickly and start with our panelists. But as we think about, partnership and collaboration, those are intentional words that are very strategic. And so I'd love to hear from our friends, kind of as you think about your priorities in partnering with stakeholders, what are those priorities as you think about partnering with your stakeholders? What are the things that you're really thinking about when you try to form partnership to take not only your effort, but the larger community to the next level? So Shalit, maybe I'll start with you, and then you can popcorn it to your colleagues on the panel, if that makes sense.
Thanks, John. Thanks. And I'm just honored to have been invited to share my expertise. As Jennifer said, I have firsthand experience building organizations, companies, about 20 years in the nonprofit space, and it's all been based on relationship building. And I know you say, John, you say sharing sugar. I like to put a little sauce on it, and it's sugar sharing, right? It's super, it's really important. And so to answer your question, for me, what was important was to be the partner that I wanted to have, right? Or be the partner that I want to partner with. And that was to be clear about who I am, what my values are, and what I'm good at, and what my needs are in partnership. That was one of the things. Also, identifying those who know more or knew more than me about a certain issue. When I started out years ago, it was in the foster care field, and I had personal experience in the foster care system. So I had that perspective, but I didn't know how to build an organization that was going to help others, right? That may have varying different sets of expertise and experiences. So I reached out to people who I called my mentors, who have been in the space for years before I even thought about coming into the space. And they were able to help me, and guide me into where I can start. And from there was able to build a successful nonprofit organization that, I raised millions of dollars for my organization, and we put foster care on the map and had people starting to think differently about foster youth. So, I relied on them to show me and give me information that I didn't have access to. And so it was more of a co-design, approach to the work. So that's the second thing that I would say. And then also being clear on what partnership means. It may mean something different to different people, but who aligns with, you know who you are, you know what your core values are, you know what you're good at, and you know what you need. But the gap is, then what does partnership mean? What am I trying to gain? What do I expect from a partnership? What do they expect of me? Being clear about those things. And sometimes that can manifest out into MOUs, right? You got to have it in writing. What does that look like? But yeah, those were the top three things for me: being clear about what I was good at, and that I would be someone that someone else would want to partner with. And then, reaching out to those people who have been doing the work and who have knowledge that I do not have, and then seeing what partnership could look like in a win-win situation.
Thanks for sharing.
Jasmine, all right to go to you.
Definitely. So yeah, I'm really honored. Again, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me on this panel. I'm really excited when I reflect about the history of our organization, the African Diaspora Alliance, and the Youth of the Diaspora program, that some of the first partnerships or collaborations that we were able to engage in were with other youth-led organizations in Baltimore City. So at the time that my co-founder and I, Mariah Ray, that we started our organization, we were considered youth. We were like 22, 23 years old. And Youth as Resources is another youth-based organization, and one of the only sources of grant funding that we received our very first year. And so when Fagan was telling the story of how Baltimore came into fruition, I really resonate with that, because it was other Baltimore youth like us who we were speaking directly to. The Youth as Resources board is made up predominantly of young people. And so we were speaking to other people like ourselves about what we were experiencing in the city, what our solutions were for it. And they trusted us. And I think that speaks a lot about how we've been able to navigate all future partnerships and collaborations that we have engaged in as an organization, because we have been so supported by the city where majority of our work, has begun. And it really has been been an honor to be able to work with other young people who are in positions to, authorize these kinds of things, because we see a lot of times the funding that's available for organizations oftentimes is like there's a lot of gatekeeping that's taking place. So to see that young people from Baltimore City are actually self-determining the programs that get to exist in the city, I think is an excellent solution for addressing the problems that our city faces.
Jasmine, I would love to go a little deeper on that. To me, partnership is tested and it's forged in the context of disagreement, or where a partner has to trade something off or give something up for the greater good. And so I'm curious kind of how, as a veteran organizer and as a leader of community and leader of people and a leader of young people, how do you think about how to keep the big goal in mind when everyone's got, maybe aligned agendas, but not identical agendas, and there needs to be some give and take?
Yeah. So this I feel like John saying he has 10 stories, like it's kind of coming up for me right now. Some of my favorite stories within the history of our organization, but I feel like the stakes are pretty high in terms of the work that we do within the African Diaspora Alliance, because we're facilitating international travel for minors, right? So, and it's oftentimes the first time students have left Baltimore or the East Coast or the country. And so we definitely have had issues when it comes to other adults that we're working with. Something may happen with a student and we have varying ideas as to how to go about that, and it's like, should we still travel with a student, right? Sometimes being the ultimate question, like, because that is the capstone for our program, that oftentimes being what's up for debate when it comes to maybe how to handle a situation pertaining to students. So I will say that there's a lot of conversations involving the parents as much as possible, involving the school as much as possible, and really thinking about when we think about the work of like decolonization, are we able to engage in a decolonial practice as it pertains to disagreements within one another, between one another as leaders, but especially when we're dealing with the youth, so that we're not engaging in like punitive responses when it comes to how we work with the students. And I think that's how we keep the main goal in focus, because ultimately these partnerships have come together because we do share this common goal of being able to have young people in the city be able to self-determine our realities, and doing that through a decolonial process by way of ensuring that the pedagogy that we're working with in our programs reflect that. So I feel like as educators, we're always reflecting and like challenging ourselves, like, okay, being called in by one another. Me and Mariah do that all the time. Like, hey, I think this could have maybe gone like this, or this could have gone like this, or at the end of the day, if we don't take the student, they're still going to be missing, whatever it is that we may feel like they're missing right now. That's us leaving them behind, so to speak, and not taking them on this trip may not also may not produce the outcomes that we're looking for, right? So really keeping the outcomes in mind, and also ensuring that we're not, that we're honoring the practice that we want to reflect, that we want the students to reflect.
That's awesome. I'm going to dig deeper on that. I'm going to dig deeper for Shalita, for you, Jasmine, and then Fagan. I'd love you to add in on this as well. And so, here at TRO, we had created a fund around sharing sugar sharing, as Shalita would say. And what we realized is, we've done hundreds of simulations on partnerships, and we had met with 20 some odd collaboratives that ultimately we were only able to make a small number of deals. And so, and the reason is that people had created these rules or been taught these rules of partnering that often prevented real community and real change from happening, right? And you could have people that walked into the room saying, I'm the greatest collaborator ever, creating rules on how to partner that really made things more difficult. So this relates to the larger question that I want to ask is, like, as you've thought about authentically connecting and partnering to kind of help further community, what are the wrong ways that you've seen partnerships happen? What are those rules that people have created that makes true partnership, prevents true partnership? I'd love to kind of see some of the challenging sides that you have seen of partnership to give everybody an understanding of, what they should watch out for, what they shouldn't do, those types of things. And so, Shalita, why don't we start with you again, and then just popcorn all the way to Fagan after Jasmine.
Yeah, I think one of the things is, coming into a partnership with hidden agendas, number one. I think, building long-lasting collaborations is built on trust. And a lot of times we don't want to take the time to actually do that, or we enter into partnerships or collaboration thinking that, or having a false idea or thought of what it could look like, that it should look perfect, and there's no such thing as perfection anyway, but that we will make mistakes along the way. Not taking the time to take a step back and set community agreements, whatever that might look like, depending on who the different partners are. We have to take a step back, and that's what we've been doing with the Grassroots Collaborative. Is when we had the retreat, is what do we define as community? And what do we want this building trust in our relationship to look like? And what pieces do each of us bring together? And how can we, one, hold each other accountable and support each other as well? And so I think when we enter into those types of partnerships without taking the time to be authentic, number one, and being transparent about why we're actually there, and looking for that common thread. We all may, what they say, unity, not uniformity. So we all may have different ways of thinking and different ways of approaching something, but we can establish a common goal. Those are, that's just, I can talk about it forever, but the things that come to my mind initially is skipping over building that trust, or understanding that building trust is going to take a little bit of time.
I definitely agree with that, Shalita. I would also add, for us, like the two biggest challenges we've faced have been, or hindrances to partnerships have been, folks who are intending on working with a different demographic than we are. And also, I would say, to speak to the demographic, we have students. So we originally started off working at Frederick Douglass High School, and there are some folks who, have whatever ideas they have about Frederick Douglass, and were adamant that they were not interested in partnering with us if that was the demographic of students we would be working with. And so that's always very challenging, because again, similar to you, Fagan, we chose Frederick Douglass specifically in our inception because of the impact that those students experienced during the uprisings, like kind of being right at the heart of that, and the resources not being available for them to process. And so there were some folks who were interested in partnering with, who were not interested in working with that demographic. And then the second thing I'd say in terms of challenges are kind of like respecting the nuances to the work that folks do, or like respecting the wheelhouse, if you will. So I would say Mariah and I are experts in curating African and Indigenous centered study abroad experiences. And there are some people who are also experts in doing youth organizing work, right? But there are nuances to all of the facets of, of what it means to lead a group of students from Baltimore to Havana and get them back, home safely. And so I would say when we're engaging in partnerships, just really taking the time to flesh out like who, what the scope of work will be for each partnering organization, so that we are respecting the expertise that everyone has. If Mariah and I are bilingual, and so it's going to be better for us to engage with certain partners because of our ability to communicate with them, or the time and the rapport that we have, being in country, for example, that may be a challenge if a partner is wanting to do something that's outside of, what we know to be customary, what we know to be tradition with the community that we're building solidarity with transnationally.
These are such good points. I think the one piece I would add is that partnership really breaks down when there isn't a presumption of competence, and when there isn't humility around how the solution is centered and where the solution is centered. And so kind of the analogy I would use to kind of make this argument is like, our justice system, when it works because there's a presumption of innocence. and that holds everyone accountable to a very high standard. People get representation. There's a jury to hear people out. And I think social change work, quote unquote, works when there's a presumption of competence, when we assume that the people in the community driving the solutions are competent, they know what it is that they're trying to solve, and they know what's best about what we do. And I think sometimes what happens is, and particularly in philanthropy, there's a presumption of incompetence and somehow that people don't know what to do. And what you see is then people start layering on requirements, and they say, okay, well, I need 3 years of audited financials, and I need documentation of that and proof of this. And all of those are barriers. And all of that doesn't center their competence. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that the community leader, the community organization knows how to generate an audited financial, but it's centering the wrong thing in the solution. Those things at their best are simply tools. They're simply tools. And when we reverse it and we kind of make that the main event, like your ability to do a lot of the mechanics, as opposed to connecting with community and moving community to a better and stronger place, I think that's a projection of white supremacy. And I think that's something that really perverts and distorts community action and social change. And so what I've seen in our community is overwhelmingly elevation awardees, social entrepreneurs in East and West Baltimore, the people who live in these communities, the people who have raised their own families in these communities, know exactly what needs to be done. And they're very self-aware about where they need support on the mechanics, whether it's a banking relationship or a line of credit or getting this accounting piece. All of that is rightly downstream from the most important piece, which is knowing exactly how to move forward. And so I think a lot of times partners come in and think they're being helpful, and really what they're doing is projecting an ideology that assumes the inferiority of our communities. And I think that's infuriating. And I think community finds that condescending. I think they find it offensive. And it then creates walls and barriers when we need bridges, and we need outreach, and we need connection.
That's so good. That's all 3 points just built on each other so well. I'm going to dig in a little bit on that, but try to take partnership in the world that we currently are on. I think everybody is on a screen right now. But one of the things I wanted to just note is, in my past life, we created a simulation that was called the real world, but that ultimately was geared on the idea of watching folks try to collaborate. And the reason it's called the real world is because what ultimately ended up happening, we did this simulation 800 times and it only worked 9 times. And the idea was that people would come together and build one thing. So we would often separate the room into 4, give them an envelope, and inside the envelope, they'd all have different types of materials. And we would watch 800 times this simulation almost happen identical each time, other than the 9 times that it worked. In 7 of the 9 times, it was young people that won. And so what that taught us is that our way of collaborating is a learned response. We have learned to collaborate this way, that actually young people got to this way of sharing sugar more quickly. But one of the things that popped out in that simulation, I promise there's a question, is in each of the envelopes, each envelope would have different materials. So one envelope might have a bunch of markers and some scissors, a ruler. Another might have multicolored pieces of paper, or whatever the case may be. All had the same directions on what to build. One group had 5 pieces of white paper, and they would often in the session kind of say, hey, look at all these other groups. They have more than what I have. Like, it's not fair. But what they didn't realize is that the other groups needed white paper to make their project end to complete, and that they were experts in white paper. They had a power, a very specific power on how to make community work. And I think oftentimes in community, we are challenged with the idea that we're commonly looking at others, but without also realizing what makes our own power really strong and unique. They were the equivalent of the domestic violence shelter in a community, or a group that focused very specifically on something strong. And without them, community doesn't work. So the reason I bring this up is that community now has gone through some changes, right? In some places it's really the same, but we are in a world right now where technology and others are a big part of how we come together. And so I guess I would wonder from you all, understanding the dynamics of how you form community, whether it's in that real world exercise that I described or otherwise. What is important to know and understand in this kind of remote world of building community that we're in? And Fagan, we'll start with you and then work our way back around to Shalita, if that makes sense.
One thing that springs to mind for me, John, is understanding that not everyone has access to the same set of tools. And look, we're doing this on Zoom. Zoom's great. Thank God for Zoom, right? Where would we be but for Zoom? And a lot of folks don't have access to it, can't work it. It's just not on the table. And so we've got a lot of tools for connecting over distance. We've got telephones, we've got SMS, we've got computers, we've got letters, we've got flyers, we got brochures. And so for us, you've got to throw the kitchen sink at outreach in this environment, and you got to find ways to get the word out. You can't only rely on technology. The city council and a lot of folks in our city have done a lot of tremendous work naming this kind of digital equity divide. And the upshot is this, somewhere between a third, almost half of our city is not wired into the World Wide Web. And so there is big a part of our community as everyone on this call is. And so that's a reality, and equity has got to be front and center in how we think about outreach and connecting. And so for us, it's making sure that there are a variety of means for people to connect. Something we take really seriously at Baltimore Core, I call it, for lack of a better term, like a customer service orientation, is if folks want to do a consultation with us and they want to just get on the phone and talk about, whatever it is that they're trying to do, we're available to do that, whether it's one of our programs in workforce or one of our programs in entrepreneurship. You can't do this thing where you say, oh, we'll just go to the website and apply and it's all there. That actually is very inequitable and very unfair and very inaccessible. And so I think a lot of people have been frustrated in this current climate because it is so isolating. And I think it's brought out a lot of stressed response in people, understandably. I think people are really struggling with this because, only 20% of our population are actually digital natives. I'm not super old, but I'm 34 years old. I'm not a digital native. There was internet in my house till I was almost 18. Did not grow up on this. And so I can only imagine for folks who maybe are a different generation, just how maddening this kind of environment is, because you've taken away that ability to connect either in person or to relate over another method. And so I think it's a very simple point, but I do think it's one worth just centering, is you've got to be accessible, and you got to find as many different ways to be accessible for people. Because what you're signaling by doing that is you're telling them that they matter, and that their voice matters, and that it's worth the extra effort to make sure that they're included. So that's what I would say to that.
And thanks, Megan. You made me think about because I put together some talking points previously, and my mind went to more of the tangible things around Zoom and podcasts and stuff like that. But I also think it's important to identify who are you trying to, what types of partnerships are you nurturing through remote means? Who is your target audience? Who are you communicating with? Because like you said, you have to take into consideration that a lot of people do not have access, and so I started thinking more about, as building partnerships with either colleagues or other people who doing work in the community that do have access. There's different ways to be able to build those connections. It doesn't replace in person, absolutely not. And it does require a level of a lot of compassion, because as we see over the past year, especially if you do have access to, to Zoom and these different virtual, platforms, Wi-Fi is not always reliable. People don't have a dedicated space to be able to work out of. Sometimes that might be quiet. So you see kids in the background and dogs in the background. It has just introduced a new level of compassion that we are all human. And I think that's helpful. That's good, because a lot of us are used to hiding behind masks and pretending this, when we talk about decolonizing professionalism, or this is, I have to be, I'm all perfect, I have everything together. But no, the virtual world has shown us that in more ways than one. But some ways that have helped me is, participating in podcasts, webinars, like this panel's discussions relevant to to the population you're wanting to work with, or the people that you're wanting to connect to. I know a lot of times people, and it doesn't, regardless of how large their following is or small their following is, you trying to get the word out and building those relationships and partnerships. You never know who knows someone, or who knows someone who knows someone, and who might be inspired or wanting to connect with you via a platform like that. I've also started really trying to put more into social media platforms. I know we're all tired of it. Not everybody is good at that. I'm still learning IG and how to put a story up and how long you put it. I still have a lot to learn, but people are on IG, figuring out how to put a video up there, or, being consistent on there, getting people who can help you with that, because that may not be your skill set. But another piece, for me, is team building and creating a tribe of people that can help you with different pieces, and that might be one of them. Engaging people around virtual events. Now we've gotten into a space where we are, and some of us are virtual event out, but compared to when we first started with this, people are getting the hang of it, and it's going to be around for a while. Like, for instance, Fagan John has supported the Visionaries of Color nonprofit summit that we've done, and if it wasn't for that platform, I don't know. I mean, I've known of John in your work, but being able to connect with you in that way through someone who I knew, who said, "Hey, reach out to John." Joe Jones was like, reach out to John and see if he wants to be a part of that. And it was a virtual event, and then John came and sponsored and shared knowledge with everyone. And I was like, John, I really wanted to get connected with Baltimore Court. Okay, well, hey, let me make an email introduction with Fagan, and bam, and then here I am, right? So even in not even being in person, right? Fagan, I haven't even met you in person yet, but here we are, you supporting something that I'm doing in the community, me being able to be brought on in some way to support the work that you're doing, and it was all virtual. So, it still has a place, and those are just some tangible ways that have helped me to still be able to build networks and partnerships and collaborations, even when we're not able to be in person.
So there's two things that come to mind when I think about real world connectivity. First, as it pertains to the demographic that we serve, of all the students in the United States who have an opportunity to study abroad, only about 5% of those students are Black and Brown students. And then the second, when it comes to about 50% of our partners, if not more, quite literally did not have access to Wi-Fi and data.
Jasmine, we might have lost you.
Oh no, Jasmine.
To connectivity and accessibility. This is something from the very beginning Mariah and I have really worked hard to navigate. And ultimately what that has meant for us a lot of times is, are you all able to hear me okay?
Yep, we can now.
Okay. So what that has meant a lot of times for Mariah and I is that quite literally our connection takes place because we have been able to physically make travel accessible for folks to meet one another. I just got a message saying that some of my stuff had things I was saying was breaking up, but I was saying the first about the study abroad statistics, only 5% of Black and Brown students in the United States have a chance to study abroad. So that's a huge disparity as it pertains to education that we're addressing when it comes to real life connectivity. And the second was that over 50%, about 50% or more of our partners have not even had access to Wi-Fi and data because they haven't had access to it by way of being in Cuba. Most of our partners have been in Cuba because that's where many of our study abroad programs have taken place. And so a lot of our connections have had to come quite literally from flying folks from one country to another, which is part of the mission of what we do, is to work towards liberation by way of healing and connecting the African diaspora through education and travel. And so, for example, we may be teaching students about the presence of African descendants in Cuba by way of YouTube videos or documentaries, using maps or other educational instructional materials that we'll create but then we'll have an opportunity to bring one of our community members from Cuba to the United States and set up opportunities for us to work with students at Towson University or at the schools where we're working. And then those same students have had chances to then go to Cuba. And they're like, oh, this is La Fina. This is the music that we were hearing. This is who we saw at Towson. And or this is the music group from Colombia that we were able to bring from Cartagena to come to Baltimore and perform for students. And set up other sites on their tour up and down the East Coast. And then those same students and high school and university students have a chance to then travel with us. And it's truly, we work extremely hard to make sure that it's not a one-directional approach as it pertains to travel and accessibility, that on both sides, our partners in Cuba, because we're working with young people in these countries as well, have a chance to stay connected with students in Baltimore. So if I had a chance, I would pull up a picture right now of a community center in Havana, Cuba, in a smaller community called Los Pocitos, where there's tons of letters written from elementary school students right here in Baltimore who wrote the letters, gave them to their teacher, who was an educational major at Morgan State. And then she traveled and was able to bring all of these letters. And the students were able to write letters in return back to the students in Baltimore. So quite literally getting back to, some of the fundamentals, the press, writing, and of course, navigating the airways so that students have an opportunity to travel. And then I guess I'll just also add, of course, as it pertains to like the recruitment process, I agree 100%, like applications being online as the only way to submit, not accessible at all. So normally when we engage in recruitment, we come in person. We will go to every English class. This is generally how we do it at Frederick Douglass. We'll present our program to every English class because that's one of the subjects that all students will be taking within the grades that we serve. And we'll present the program to the English classes. We'll have paper options available for the applications. We'll leave some at the office. It'll also be available online. So students have a variety of ways for how they can complete, the applications and then any subsequent assignments and things that we may have.
That's awesome. Okay. That's so much. I almost could wrote a book just on those responses. That's really awesome. So the last question, and then I think tomorrow and Jennifer, we're gonna take questions from the crowd. So this is what I know. I've been married for 20 years. Like all partnerships, you don't get the wedding ring on the first date. It takes a while to get to know each other, but also sometimes most of the times it's amazing. Sometimes it can be challenging, right? And what I love about my wife is that she knows everything about me, but she can also push her thumb in my side when I'm needed. Or when it's needed, which is sometimes often. And so the thing I would bring to you all as you think about partnerships is, what kind of partnerships are you seeking as you move forward? And I'm especially interested in the partnerships that are really going to stick their thumb in your side. It's easy to grab like-minded folks and have a barbecue together and then high-five each other on how awesome things are. What's really hard to help us grow is when we select that partner that tries us, that sometimes can be challenging to us, but we know by connecting with them, they're going to get us to the next level. So I would love to know, and Shalita, we'll start with you, and then we'll finish with Fagan, and then let the folks on the screen here ask some questions. What are some of the partnerships that you really need to help you get to the next level that are really going to work you out?
That wasn't a prep. I didn't prep for that question, John.
I like to keep it spicy, just like my marriage.
Well, I've been married for 14 years. And I will say that, I completely agree with what you just said, John. I think what really helps too is, one, the building of trust and knowing where the person is coming from, right? The intent of when it's time to hold you accountable or push your thumb in your side, that is coming from a place of love. So the types of collaboration, and when I think of partnerships, I'm thinking of all levels: micro, meso, macro, right? The relationships I have in my personal life, the collaborations that I have in my professional life, all start from that place of having some level of trust that I'm able to share with them the things that I'm working on, and that they have a level of understanding of the things that I need support with, or areas of development. And just in my partnerships, period, I look for people. I give transparency. So, communication is really big for me. And being able to be honest, somebody could pull me to the side, whether it's, like I said, personal, professional, whatever it is, and not be afraid to hold me accountable to the things that I've said that I'm going to do. So, just off the cuff of thinking of that question, John, I hope I'm getting at it, is, in all of my partnerships and collaborations, one, we're starting out, I don't forge them unless I have some basic understanding of an alignment of core values. And for me to be able to be who I am and be transparent and authentic in that, and expecting that in return. And so starting from that, from that, and then being able to share what things am I working on, what things, how I can be helpful. It's a win-win, with the reciprocity, right? And then once we create that foundation of that basic level of trust, then when I might deviate, or being able to pull me to the side and tell me about that, and then we can come up with solutions, right? So to me, those are the types of people and partnerships and collaborations where we can have each other's back, and even in rooms where I'm not there, that that person is is still supportive of you, and supportive of the mission and the vision together. So that's in a nutshell.
That's awesome, Shalita. Jasmine, how about you?
So 100% of the trips for the Baltimore City students are fully funded. And so, of course, the partnerships that we need are ones that are going to provide us with sustainable funding. Most of the grants that we've received within Baltimore have not been reoccurring. So we've been moving, from year to year with the budgets that we've received for that fiscal year from those grants. So I think if more funding opportunities or more partners were able to, if we were able to build partnerships with sources that were to allow us a more sustainable funding source, so that we could have guaranteed funding to plan, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in advance, and be able to make certain promises to the community or to certain community schools, saying, we know for sure we'll be able to guarantee our program, for the entirety of your high school career or beyond, of course. And then, of course, people who are willing to support the work by way of helping us meet those material needs, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do for the community as well. So whether it's helping to support with when it comes to flights or mental health services or food stipends, other institutions, other life-sustaining and life-supporting institutions in the city, if we're able to form partnerships with those entities as well, then that would help us meet some of the programmatic aspects that we have available, like mental health services for our students, like grocery stipends, and like participatory stipends for the students, so that we can continue to offer those things.
And John, if I might, could I just specify too, like my perspective of where I was coming from with that? Because Jasmine, yes. When we talk about sustainability, we're talking to funders and and having resources in that way. I want to, for the work that I'm doing in collaboration, we call it grassroots collaboration. I'm talking about partnerships with other Black leaders who need self-care, need to center holistic health. And so a lot of what we've been saying we need is to be able to have a mastermind group where we can come and be vulnerable and also be held accountable at the same time. So as I'm looking at what types of partnerships, I'm really at this point of looking at, connecting to the community in that way. But then when you're also talking about funders, then that's a different type of partnership, which Jasmine hit on very well.
Yep.
I'll plus one this notion of partnership as a promise and partnership as a long-term investment. These are generational problems that we're trying to solve out here, and it's going to take generational investment to solve them. And then I'll add a second piece, which is the best partnerships are like the best relationships, where there is both love and challenge. And I'll tell you a little story. So, almost 10 years ago, I moved home. And while I was gone, I had just unbelievably good fortune. went off to a 4-year school on the West Coast, a very good school, a lot of privilege, a lot of access. And when people found out where I was from, I kept running into this narrative of, well, there's so much opportunity and talent outside of Baltimore. Why would you ever go back? And the implication being there's no talent or opportunity in Baltimore. Like, why invest your life and career there? And I found that offensive, obviously. And, you know, the part of the story I don't talk as much about because it's a hard thing for me to talk about, but this is my favorite community. So I'm going to bring my best today. I bring my best every day. I'm going to bring my best plus. You know, my mother was a Black woman who was born in the 1940s in Georgia. And her parents couldn't read or write. And she was born at home in a small, like, wooden house. And she had a miraculous life. She joined the Navy. She ended up going back to school. She became a public educator. She really was a remarkable person. And towards the end of her life, when she was very sick, as I was kind of reflecting on all that she achieved, I kept wondering, man, she did all of this starting from such a place of struggle and disadvantage, and she still achieved just huge amounts in her life. And I kept turning over this question of, like, what would happen if everybody got the level of investment that I had received in my life, if other people had been poured into as much as I've been lucky enough to be poured into. I really think my mother could have been president of the United States. Black woman from Georgia could have gone on to run the world. I believe that. And when she passed away, as members of my team can probably attest, I lost the fire for the work for a while. I really was struggling in terms of showing up and connecting to the purpose because she was so much of my motivation. And I'll never forget it. I live in Mount Vernon here, kind of in city center, and there's a little convenience store over where I live. I've lived there now almost 10 years. And so I come down to the convenience store, and I'm there, and I run into Antoine Quarles, who would go on to become one of our elevation awardees. And Antoine's there because he loves the nasty coffee they make there. Like, Anton and I agree on most things, but we disagree on where we get our coffee. And by the way, he hates the Starbucks I get every day. He thinks it's way too bougie and doesn't have enough grit and kick. And so he's there getting the coffee. And he said to me, you know, I really like what y'all are doing at Baltimore Core, this idea of connecting the genius here to opportunity. Really love that. But I think you guys missed something. I said, okay, well, enlighten me. What have I missed? And he says, well, you got all these guys and all these women coming from back behind the fence where they've been locked in a cage for a year or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And there's a big to-do when we break the rules and get put in a cage. And then no one says anything when we come out, when we've paid our debt. And we have so much to give. We have so much to contribute. We've seen so much. We have so much genius, but no one's paying attention to it. And I think that you all ought to work on that if you guys are serious about what you're doing. And that lit the fire for me, that moment. And I get up every day and I think about that. And to me, it exemplifies partnership, because what Antoine did very simply is he said, I love what you're doing, and I'm also going to challenge you to be better. It takes real strength to love people. It takes real strength to love people in the struggle. And there are a lot of folks out here who love to challenge. They don't love to love. And that doesn't help us. And that doesn't move us forward. And uncritical love isn't really love, right? When you think about who you love the most, you love them enough to tell them the things that are hard and to help them grow, but it's always rooted in love. And so the partners that I'm looking for is, I want to be challenged and I want to be loved. And I want to know how we can be better and how we can better live out our mission, because if we're doing it right, it is ever expanding, and it's bringing more people in and helping unlock the genius of more people like my late mother, more people like people on this call, people who can go so far with just a little nourishment, a little support. And so I think sometimes when we throw around the word partnership, we oscillate between two extremes. We either want to be put on a pedestal and never challenged and told everything we do is great and pat on the back, or we think the best spirit of partnership is to be hypercritical about everything and to point out all the flaws and all the mistakes and to sit there with our arms crossed. We've all been there. We've been in those rooms with the skeptics and the cynics and so on and so forth. And the truth is as Dr. King said many, many years ago, you've got to have the strength to love. And it's the blending of both challenge and compassion.
Well, that is awesome. So I know we probably, hopefully, have some questions from folks that are watching the magic happen here. So I'd love to have folks kind of pitch in and answer questions. And if you don't have them, we'll have some as well, but want to leave the floor to questions. And I don't see any in the chat. So
while we're waiting for that, John, I'll ask you a question since you've done
Sure.
such a fabulous job as a moderator. I got a question right back for you. You started as a community organizer. Now you're a CEO. And yet I still sense every time I'm with you that you really still move through the world as a community organizer. How do you reconcile that when you're in kind of the diverse spaces that you're in every day, right? Let's be real, not every space that you're in is this space.
No.
And you've got to show up in a range of ways. How do you stay true to who you are at your core and who your life experience has shaped you to be, and not lose that while also doing what you need to do to kind of move the needle on the stuff that you need to move the needle on?
Yeah, so I'll use the kind of the prism of partnership as the kind of the way to talk through that. So I did start out in kind of at the grassroots level. Both my mom was an organizer and I was an organizer and a case manager, and worked for the first third of my career working directly with community members, knocking on doors, mobilizing folks, all of that really great stuff. And I love that work, but I also realized that for me, at least, what I was really good at was understanding the way organizations and systems and structures work or didn't work on behalf of those at the grassroots level. And so started a consulting firm that largely was to help recalibrate and rewire those systems and structures. And that obviously led me here. To your question on reconciling, one is I need connection to folks on the ground in order to do my job well. And, I think philanthropy, and especially corporate philanthropy, can be a place where it's, you can get by and nobody will know the difference, and everybody thinks you're smart and funny, but and you can just go in and out every day in that kind of way. But for me, in order to do this work well, I need to be rooted at the community level, and I need to have accountability partners that are like you and like a lot of others who are connecting me to the ground, but also pushing their thumb in my side, right? And so I need that partnership. And then I also need to bring my world that I'm in to that space, right? Because people don't have access to that world sometimes. And so it's I view it as part of my job to be able to do that. On the other side, it's, I'm in places where lots of high-minded discussions happen, where we're talking about the future of Baltimore without talking to Baltimore. And so my job in those rooms is to make sure that they don't do that, right? That they're actually, they're talking about people that they know by name. And if they don't know those people by name, their job is to get to know that. And at the end, the work will be better for it. And so I view myself as an advocate and a partner to those rooms to make sure that they're putting on the right goggles to do that work, right? And so it's a partnership on each side. Both sides have what I view a really pure form of partnership where we're pushing each other and we're testing each other. Just a little bit of different muscles on this side. There's a lot of, if I'm in a room full of activists, right, my skills in listening are just as important as if I'm in a room full of CEOs and heads of philanthropies and things like that. But my job in each of those worlds is to remind them of who they're talking about. Don't play chess with people's lives. To your point, activists use a lot of these phraseologies and talk in kind of high-minded areas as well. I don't know how many times we've heard phrases like, which I agree with, but like things like nonprofit industrial complex is a important word, but also can become a jargony word. My job is to say, well, what do you mean by that? Let's dig into that a little bit more, right? And then on the other side, when philanthropy folks are talking about Baltimore 2.0 and changing community. Like, what community are you talking about? Like, let's get into that. And so that's my role on each side. And I feel like I have I've been fortunate enough in my life to be able to have my feet in both camps. And so, and I also know that at any given point in time, I can lose that currency of trust on both sides. And so I have to earn that every day. And I hold those accountability partners to make sure that I'm earning that trust as well. So hopefully that's a good answer.
It's a great answer. Thank you. All right, Tamara, what's next?
I would really like to open it up to the floor. Jennifer and I have probably perfected our teacher stare at this point, but
I did a call out. I'm not a teacher stare anymore. I just call you out.
Well, you are in conversations with your awardees all the time. And so I know you know the challenges that they're working through and the things that are top of mind for them. So you can either call it out or put someone,
There's one question, something around what are some strategies in developing relationships with financial partners? Where's the money? And how do I partner with those people that have money?
I go all day on this. Well, I could start if that's helpful. I mean, I'm a moderator, not a panelist.
No, you're a panelist now, John.
All right, good.
Jennifer and I will moderate.
Well, first of all, I think the premise for me, I do think that communities have lots of resources, and it's that envelope thing right now where you start to view folks with better philanthropy or whatever the case may be as having more resource than you, right? If I think about Baltimore, nonprofits control right now $1.7 billion of capital just in their own organizations. So imagine if really good sugar sharing happened across that 1.7 and the change and the things that could happen there. And so I think the idea of coming into a situation in which we elevate folks that are, whether they're in philanthropy or otherwise, to a higher level because they have, I'm part of a network that's of 18% of the safety net. Well, that's great. You all as nonprofit folks or folks in community own a lot of capital if you wield that well. And so what I would say is the question is about like, how do you partner with folks with money? That the way that's set up is almost creating a power dynamic and dichotomy in which you can't enter that marriage in an equal place. And so my goal is to, in my role in philanthropy is to reduce and not acknowledge that I do have some power, but also community members have power, and to try to truly understand each other's power so that we can therefore partner more effectively. If I walk into a situation in which I have been held up higher because of some given power that I didn't earn, that's not going to create a long-term partnership that's good for anybody. So I just think the first thing is if you are a holder of all white paper, that's a powerful thing. And to recognize that and to bring that into a room and wield that alongside a number of others. So that's the first thing that I would do. I think the question is set up to create a dynamic that I would say, let's dumb that down so that we can truly enter space on equal footing.
And if I could jump in there too, with that, I think also getting clear on the types of financial partners you're trying to engage. A lot of times we get stuck in just traditional foundation dollars, but there's also contracts, there's fee for service, there's private foundations, there's individual philanthropists. So getting clear on, what types of funding partners do you want to engage? And then also I would say be visible as much as you possibly can. And I know sometimes as a grassroots, leader, it can be difficult to have time to get into different rooms, but when you can build your team to leverage your time, make sure that you're visible, you're part of conversations, you're a part of committees, you're attending convenings, because again, it goes back to building trust, right? So if different types of financial partners see you at meetings and hear you speaking up and see and feel and can experience your competence, then, they might even approach you for a meeting and to learn more about it. Also leveraging your networks too. So who knows somebody who knows someone? Once you get clear on what types of financial partners you want to approach. Okay, well, who do you know that might know someone there that can make a warm introduction? And it's not always about starting a conversation with, give me some money, because at the core of it, we're people, we're humans, and it's about building relationships and finding that alignment initially. And you start talking about money and then people's ears turn off. So, I found you ask for advice, you get money, you ask for money, you get advice sometimes, right? So those are just some things that that I think when you're thinking about approaching financial partners to just keep in mind.
I would plug on everything you just said, Shalita. That was spot on.
I was going to just add briefly to what Shalita was saying, and then also Fagan to kind of a bit of your previous question too, just to tie the two together. I would think about also other like ways to guarantee revenue outside of like grants and donations and things like that. So like our very first year that we facilitated a study abroad trip for students from Douglas to Cuba, we started to also create a model where just adults who were interested in traveling for the purposes of also building connection and building solidarity with the African diaspora had an opportunity to also travel with us to Cuba. And then the money that we were able to make from a demographic who was able to afford to pay to travel to Cuba, we were able to allocate some of those funds to our endeavors to get the students to come to Baltimore. So I would say something that has ensured that Mariah and I can still, live and sustain our livelihood has been having these other streams of revenue into the business so that when we do get grant funding, we don't feel, compromised in the sense of, okay, can we write in, like, we want to write in our salary, or we want to write in, stipends and things like that for other facilitators, other teachers who may be there, but feeling like, oh man, if we pay ourselves even a little bit, it feels like it's taking away so much from the students. And so until we're at a place where we have more sustainable funding, really trying to get creative with these other revenue streams. So if we're coming up with educational materials to support us teaching the students about the diaspora, can we then, sell these same educational materials to other homeschooling programs or other, private institutions who may also be interested in this work? And then when I also think about, kind of like the role that people play based upon their identity in the city, I oftentimes like to think of it, or when it comes to liberation, right, that the work exists within a continuum, and that based upon our identity, based upon our proximity to privilege and power, that's really what's determining what should be our responsibility and what is really needed of us in order to support the community. So Fagan and John may have a different proximity to funding than maybe I do based upon various things pertaining to our identity. And so one thing that we've done in addition is like creating these anti-racism trainings for other organizations in the city and throughout our country to be able to understand, well, how does privilege work? How does power work? What is the nonprofit industrial complex? And is there a reason that we want to engage with it or not? And like really getting into what's happening, in the city. And so through these trainings, these curriculums we've created for these trainings, it's kind of the inverse of what we were doing at students. So kind of just being creative, like, this is the service, this is what I know I really want to do. I know I want to be, spending my time in the classroom, working with young people to allow them to be able to travel, et cetera. But also in the meantime, we're getting contracts from other organizations in the city like Thrive or like the Board of Childcare or like GE. And there's hundreds of people in these workshops who are in similar positions as some of the executive team that is on this call, of having access to things and trying to figure out, what questions should be asked. And so finding a way to make your work as dynamic as possible so that we can sustain ourselves as we're constantly trying to procure funding, for the work that it is we want to be doing.
You're on mute. Oh, I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I'll add just a couple of quick things. This is such an important conversation. And Jasmine, I so appreciate what you just shared, and Shalita too. I think the first thing, like real talk, make sure you want to be an entrepreneur. That's number one. Just like real talk. Like if you want to do the thing more than you want to like build the thing around the thing, so to speak, like go work somewhere and go do the thing. So like that's like number one. Is I do meet a lot of folks who I'm like, I don't know, you should be doing the entrepreneurial side of this as much as you really want to go do this thing that you feel strongly about. And that's important. We need great people to do the thing. By the way, we are hiring at Baltimore Core. So if you want to come do the thing at Baltimore Core, call me, please. Let Tamara know, Jennifer know, me know. We need great people who want to just do the thing working here. So a little PSA. So just one, make sure you want to sign up for the entrepreneurial thing. And then if you do want to do the entrepreneurial thing, you got to kind of get used to balancing working at your organization or at your business with working on your organization and on your business. And this is where those are two very different skill sets. And I think sometimes people are really good at working in their organization and they're not very good at working on their organization. And so you got to seek out counsel and mentorship and support to kind of understand all the pieces on what a fundraising plan is and a marketing plan and how to do kind of the accounting and how to represent like a pitch deck and the financials and all those things. My team hates it when I do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I am available to talk these things through. I will work with Jennifer to figure out the appropriate format in which to do that. Maybe it's another one of these, or maybe it's kind of a closed door office hour thing with a handful of folks who really want to go deep. But I do care a lot about this subject, and I've learned a few things doing this. And it's very learnable, but you got to kind of go in being like, okay, I need to learn this skill set on this side of it, and not just, in other words, just being really good at whatever your intervention is not sufficient when you're trying to build the organization around it, right? To scale access to the intervention and scale its quality and so on and so forth. The point that both Jasmine and Shalita made about understand the capital markets, right? Whether it's philanthropic capital or contract revenue, debt facility, sales, like whatever the money's flowing, like understanding that intimately is super important. And diversifying your revenue strategy early is critical. Even just having a little bit of earned income before you go out to go raise dollars really enhances your ability to raise capital. The other thing I would say is like avoid kind of white knight thinking, right? Quote unquote. Like avoid this idea that like one funder is going to come in and solve everything and write a check big enough to cover all the things. They do not exist. They're like, it's just not enough money. There's too many folks vying for the dollars. Like you will have to stack up revenue and get really good at stacking it up and aligning those dollars to what you're doing. All the better if you're driving revenue in a way that's not just philanthropy, right? Philanthropy should be in the mix, but it shouldn't be the mix. And so that means you got to kind of think about a diversified revenue pipeline, assign probabilities within that pipeline, and kind of create a forecast around realistically, if I understand the full range of options here, and I've kind of assigned my chances at winning of those options, and I have everything together, this is what the business could drive in terms of dollars in and out. And so all that to say, the upshot is like just a little bit of sophistication on this and a little bit of forethought can just save you a lot of trouble. And instead I see a lot of really good people who are really good at the thing that they want to do, basically out here operating on a wing and a prayer, hoping somebody's going to come in and just write a check. And that's about as much situational awareness they have. Cause like the other thing I would say is like, you kind of project your attitudes around money onto this process. And if you didn't grow up with any money, I get it. I also like for a long time was kind of hoping someone would just swoop in and solve it. Right. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things that I get over as someone who grew up working class and blue collar, like, which I think is not dissimilar from a lot of the backgrounds of this call. One of the hardest things was like getting comfortable asking someone for more money than what my parents made in a given year. Like I just had a real hard time, like emotionally being like, holy shit, I'm gonna have a 1 hour conversation with someone and they're gonna write a check that is more than I know what the household income is in the house that raised me. And you would be there. They're like, and people would say, so how can I help? And you know that that's the invitation to be like, I want $50,000. And you're just like freaking out inside because you're like, that is more money than my parents made last year. How is this going to happen? And so that's not the philanthropist, that's you. That's your stuff. And so you got to kind of get sophisticated, get some knowledge around it, get some support, really understand how it works, take the scary out of it, take the taboo out of it, take the shame and the guilt and the confusion and the angst and the anger, and just kind of take some of that emotion out of it, put some framework around it. And it actually is a lot more doable than what it seems on its face. But if you kind of skip that part and you just jump straight into like, I'm a really good X and you should fund me for doing X, you're really setting yourself up for a world of hurt.
Yep. And the only thing I would add is to what Fagan just said is, I love elevation awards and I love elevation awardees. And so I will meet with, I know my team, just like Fagan's team, will say, don't do this, but I do it all the time, right? I wake up early and I go to bed late, and outside of my wife and kids, this is all I really think about. And so I will meet anytime with anybody to kind of help them get to the next level, right? And for me, like Fagan, I grew up homeless and my family made $650 a month, right? But I can ask for money all day. And so for me, like, I know that sometimes people just don't have the special handshake. They don't know what that is, right? And so for me, I want to help folks play the game better and authentically, without feeling like they've sold out, but also help them be able to walk into a place full of air and being able to do what they do and have people say, I got to have a piece of that, right? Like, and I want to be able to help you show your best self. So at any given point in time, john.brothers@heroprice.com. Email me anytime and we'll find a place. I eat at the same spot, Kay's Place on 25th. When it opens again, I'm there every Tuesday at 6:30 in the morning, and people just show up there and I hang out with them, right? And so, but even that, I'm happy to just take phone calls, do Zooms, whatever is needed to help you get to the next level. And I look forward to that. No worries. You're not bothering me. I would love to be able to be helpful.
As someone who's gotten that advice from John, like actually, like it wasn't that long ago where I was really struggling with like how to ride the bike, so to speak, right? Because these become pretty complex operations pretty fast. Like that offer is real and sincere, and it's really helpful to sit down with somebody like, hey, demystify this for me and just help me understand how this all works. A little bit of that knowledge goes a long way.
I know that we're slightly over, so I want to be respectful of our panelists' time. Does anyone have a question? Like, I'll say like one final good, hearty question.
Yes, I have a question. Good evening, everyone. My question is, how do I build a strong team on a chewing gum budget?
Can I respond really quick? I just wanted to say, hey, brother, peace, Michael, and Ross Trey. It's good to see y'all on the call, and I'm sending you an email like before the end of this week. And Ross, peace. I hope to see you soon come.
I'll just take a second to address it. Hi, Michael. That's the thing I do. I love building teams, right? And I have built teams on a shoestring budget and been able to expand it. So what I would say is get clear on what you need help with first, right? So then you can identify people in your network who can maybe help you with those things. And also being clear about your passion behind what you're doing, because that emotional component is going to attract people who want to help you and connect with you and understand that you don't have the money right now, but through a shared vision, someday you will. And so that's with just the amount of time that we have, because I could go deeper into that on how to break it down. But yeah, first get clear on what you need, who in your circle can help you with that and have those levels of expertise. And then, let them know that, hey, this is the vision. This is how I see you fitting into this vision. They can see themselves in that vision. and then being upfront with, hey, I don't have no money right now, but this is where we're trying to go. Can you help me? And be, reasonable about what you need from them. Initially, it might be a couple hours here and there, but, making that plan on what that is, and they will be willing to ride with you. I've seen that. I've experienced that. My team now, it's not like we rolling in the dough. People volunteer their time, but because they are invested emotionally and they can see where we're going, they stick around. So I hope that's helpful.
I'll build on that answer because it's such a good answer. And Michael, it's good to see you, man. The first thing is, like, given the role you're in, is to first get clear on what the highest and best use of your time is. And so I'll give you a piece. I'll tell you a story where I got some advice early on that changed my trajectory as a social entrepreneur. So way back, this was like 2014 going into Christmas time, and we'd been at it. And by we, I mean me. I'd been at it for about a year and a half, almost 2 years at this point. And one of my mentors at the time was the national head of the NAACP, because I used to work at the NAACP as an organizer. And so he emails me and he was like, hey, let's get some pizza down at the Inner Harbor. Let's talk. I want to hear how everything's going. So I go down to the Inner Harbor, go get my pizza, and we sit down. And he says, so how's Baltimore Core going? And I said, it's going great. He says, tell me why it's going great. I said, well, we got a cohort of fellows, and I'm like programming these fellows, and like we're working on stuff, and like, we got some placements and we got some partners like hosting the fellows. I'm telling them all about the programmatic work we're doing. And he was like, okay, that's cool. He's like, listen, it's not going great. I was like, okay. I was like, why do you say that? He says, well, you have fallen into the integrity trap. And I said, what's the integrity trap? He said, you get up every day thinking about program first, fundraising second, marketing communications last. And you got it all wrong, man. Like, you actually think that if you like labor in obscurity, the world is going to somehow figure out that you out here doing this work, and the resources are going to like conspire around you and build the organization. Like, that's what you think. And I was like, yeah, kind of, like, this is good work, right? And he's like, wrong. You need to get up every day thinking about communications and messaging and telling the story first. That's 51% of your time. Fundraising second, that's like 40% of your time. And then with whatever time's left, you need to work on the work, which then dovetails into your question. I could not do what I do. I couldn't unless I worked with someone like Karen McFarland, who is on this call. Like, seriously, I spend about 10% of my time on team and program, not because I don't love team and I don't love program, but it's not my job. And this is what I was getting at earlier. When you decide to be an entrepreneur, you got to know what the job is. My job is to tell our story and to raise money so we have the resources, the people, and the attention. And so first get clear on your role as like employee number one. And then you got to find whether it's a volunteer, part-time, or full-time. And it might just be a volunteer who's really inspired by you and what you're doing. You got to find your Karen. You got to find someone who is a partner in team building and a partner in culture. And if you neglect that, as Karen can attest, I'm not going to put her on the spot because she would not like that. But what she would say if she were to speak is like, it becomes a hot mess real fast if you're trying to manage down team and manage fundraising and manage messaging and you're trying to do it all. You're trying to be Superman. And so get clear on what your value add is as the entrepreneur. And then you got to find a partner who's going to help you build this out and build it out responsibly and build it out thoughtfully. Because people, whether they're volunteers or they're paid staff, can do amazing work. But guess what people need? They need direction. They need coaching. They need clear job descriptions. They need management. They need like performance improvement. Like, they need all of these things that is more than a full-time job. And if I didn't have Karen on my team, who got up every day living and breathing team and how to make our team as good as it can be, and also to help our team through like some really difficult shit, we just wouldn't make it. We just would not make it. And so if anyone hearing this is like, ooh, I don't really want to raise money and tell the story every day, I want to like do the thing, I will go back to what I said earlier. We have job openings and we'd love for you to come do the thing with us.
Yep.
If you're like, no, that's exciting, I want to build the thing, sure, then let's talk. That's how you do it. Karen, I don't know if you want to add anything, just to give you the quick option of weighing in. Otherwise, I think Tamara had the little emoji up.
I'll just say this, whoever you get, they have to catch your vision, right? And it's so important for the organization. I always warned Fagan, I said, if someone comes in and has their own vision for Baltimore Core and where we're going, I'm always concerned. They can have vision about the work that they're going to do, right? Jennifer had a vision for social innovation, but it falls in line with the ultimate vision. So the partnership part is so important, in that they get the vision and they're able to execute it and work that vision through the team. So I'll just add that and turn it over to Tam.
And I was gonna add that with Baltimore being pretty situated next to a lot of colleges and universities, I think on a chewing gum budget, it can building partners around some of these colleges and universities for their volunteer and internship programs. You can get interns who, one, will just join forces with you. I think Fagan kind of left this out of his testimony, but one of his front runner volunteers turned into an employee was a college student that became pretty enthralled with the work. And so, you can find very passionate individuals who are very skilled. I always like how Karen says, I like hiring people that are smarter and more skilled in a very specific place, because then I just have to manage them and coach them into culture and into leadership, but they have the skill to take the work far. And I found that on the programs team, when we've brought in college students and interns, they've been able to take the work far in avenues that Jennifer and I weren't even able to really think of or conceive of. So there's a great bounty there. And I mean the spectrum from programming work to financing, to research and development, to building systems. You go to Johns Hopkins CIP program or some of these other internship programs in the city, and you're going to get an intern that's going to just run circles. You're going to have to just think of new work that needs to get done, because they're like, boom, got it. Here's your presentation. Here are your next steps. What do you need me to do next? I think that they're a great group to have on a shoestring budget, and you're in a lucky place in Baltimore to have a big bounty of that.
The only thing I would add, Michael, is a couple of things. So I do think that individuals who understand the way money works in the nonprofit sector are going to be more successful in being able to get the resources that they need, right? So 80% of nonprofit dollars are spent on people. Yet if we look at the technical areas that you likely need people in, for example, people need technology folks. We're only utilizing 30% of the capacity of these individuals that we have, right? So as you said, hey, how do I make this work? It's not like you don't have enough money to fund something towards human capital, right? You just don't have enough potentially to hire a full-time person. But cumulatively, if you need technology evaluation or other kind of technical areas within the nonprofit sector, you could come together with others to fund that position. Second is just there are a lot of resources dedicated to human capital that are unutilized. So, we just brought up universities. Universities send back millions upon millions of work study dollars back to the federal government because they can't spend them. That is a fact. So if you can go to universities, whatever ones you want, and say, I've got some work study positions that I could have funded right now, which on average pay $15 minimum an hour. You have that stuff if you need research or on the ground work, but that all comes back to the idea that you need understanding the way money moves in the nonprofit sector is going to help you find those fishing spots to be able to partner and collect and things like that. The last thing I would say is less than 40% of 1% of all nonprofit dollars is spent on professional development. And so if you are not committed to the idea of developing, now I say this for two reasons. One, if you're not committed to the developing of the people that you're bringing in, volunteer, work study, part-time or full-time, that's a problem. But it's also a strategic opportunity because no one is doing it. So if you can strategically think through, and it's low-hanging fruit, right? Nonprofit folks aren't asking for more money. They're asking to be respected and recognized. That's the number one thing that nonprofit people want, right? They're not looking for their own parking spot. If they were, they'd go and work at T-Row like myself, right? They go in corporate America. What they're looking for is to be respected and recognized. So if you can create an environment where you're routinely respecting and recognizing people, you're giving them professional development, and you're partnering with others to meet the needs of the day, which are largely going to be human capital related, you're likely going to meet your human capital areas. If you don't do those things and you don't understand the way money moves in the nonprofit sector, you're always going to come from a deficit standpoint, and you're not likely going to be able to meet the needs of the day.
Thank you. I will say that Baltimore Court does a great job with that last point, with some of our benefits. So thanks, Karen and Fagan.
Oh, can I add really quick?
Yes.
Okay. I'll also just say, Michael, symbiotic relationships have been key. So like how we move with nature, how we breathe benefits the trees, what they do also benefits us breathing. So finding people who need something along the lines of what you already have, right? Like, okay, I know, for example, we might want to document this trip we take to Cuba. We might not have the money in the budget to pay the filmmaker to do it, but I can finesse you getting on this flight for free. And there's an extra bed with one of the chaperones, so I can, maybe provide housing as well. So an exchange of services right off the bat, like, okay, cool. The filmmaker loves the opportunity to be able to travel. It already works out that I have, some availability, like by way of like the ticket or the room to be able to provide them accommodations, and we're willing to make it work. In another scenario, they might, for another organization, they might say, no, you have to pay to fly me out and 10 racks on top of that. But because they do align with your mission and your values, maybe they're willing to just go with the exchange of services. And maybe one other example is finding like other organizations in the city who maybe do have the budget, who maybe do have access to money that you're looking for, and offering a programmatic service to them that's also helping them fulfill one of their program needs. So for example, there's another youth program that reached out to us because they were looking to come up with something for the capstone for the youth they were working with, the youth leaders they were working with. And so we were also looking to get money and do what we do by way of traveling with the students. So they contracted us, this organization, another youth-based program, contracted us to facilitate specifically the study abroad portion so that they could fulfill their capstone. So just finding ways to see like what makes your program unique, what are other things other programs may need. Like I may have, money in my budget for mental health services, and maybe that's something that's available within your organization. So I would say just in some more like shorter real-time scenarios, what do you have? What do other people need? And like, seeing if there's a way to just help those material needs be met, and bartering, so on and so forth like that.
And those are examples of sugar sharing. Sharing the sugar.
Yes.
All right. I'm pretty sure that triggered a lot of additional questions, but I'm available for you all. So if you all reach out to me and say that there's like other things that you all want to learn and know, I know that Fagan definitely has volunteered his time. Same thing with John, and now there are like calendars that have to try to figure out where they have space, but they are very knowledgeable and also very giving of their time and information, and I know that they will definitively make time to meet if I circle back with them all around this, and it will probably be easier if it's like more than one person. This group wants to have additional conversation about X, Y, and Z. So with that being said, thank you all, everyone that sat on the panel. Thank you, Shalita, Jasmine, Fagan, and John for your time, for your energy, for your knowledge, for your perspective. They have all been very helpful, and we're grateful for that. Again, I'm supposed to plug EA again. The application is open. If this is from seeing this, if this is something that you're interested in, definitely advise you to apply. Visit our website, baltimorecore.com, for additional information and opportunities to be in these places and spaces with these great people. Tomorrow, we have an information session. Feel free to join us then for additional information on EA. It looks like October 9th. Shalita, you have virtual and in person. Is that like your availability or like?
No, that was just plugging the Visionaries of Color.
Oh, okay.
That's coming
Yeah.
up October 9th. Yeah.
Okay, so Visionaries of Color Nonprofit Summit for Black leaders within nonprofit, or if you're thinking of starting one, is happening on October 9th, virtual and in person. You provided the website, but I'm going to circle back to you all with more information so that you all can sign up and attend if that's something you're interested in. Jasmine has shared her information. John Brothers said that LinkedIn is his business card. But again, happy to connect these individuals to you all. And with that said, thank you all for your time. I will be reaching out to you all for our check-ins. And you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Fagan, Jasmine, and
So much,
Shalita.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.